Everybody on this. All right. So I'd like to say welcome to everyone to attending this third in our webinar series, Beyond Numbers, Exploring the Actuarial Universe, not actual. Today's talk is a continuation of the theme of having 4 panelists, and today we're going to be focusing on charting your career course. Now, very briefly, I'm going to talk for a couple of minutes about where actuaries work, and then I'm going to hand over to each of the panelists. I'll introduce them, and then I'll talk for 5 minutes or so about their careers. Then you'll have an opportunity for half an hour or so to raise questions, and we'll answer them, either individual members of the panel or collectively. They'll each have a go at answering a question. You can use the chat facility, so raise your questions in there as we go through. If you have things specific to a domain of knowledge, there may be a panel member who's an expert in that field, and they may answer as we go through. Otherwise, we'll get to them at about sort of 4:20, 4:30. So where do actuaries work? Well, looking at this list here, you can see there's the traditional areas of general insurance, life insurance, superannuation, investments, reinsurance, health, etc. But as you can see, there's quite a wide range, and just picking on one or two you may not have thought about is, for example, towards the bottom of the list, government and regulatory agencies. Clearly, there's things like APRA, you might have heard of them, but there's also a widening number of actuaries working in governments in terms of projecting supply and demand for government services. Data science and technology is a huge growth area for the Actuaries Institute and our members. About 20 to 30% of our members now either work directly or indirectly with data science. And what I'm going to do now, I'm just actually going to go over to our first panelist, our group of 4 panelists. We've got Stanley, Simone, Adam, and Mark. I'll introduce each one very briefly about their background and hand over to them to talk about their career. So first of all, I'm going to introduce Stanley, who is a senior data analyst or a capital team coordinator at Resolution Life. He's a fellow, lives in Sydney, works in data analytics, finance, life insurance, and reinsurance. So there's a great example of somebody working across multiple areas. One significant highlight of Stanley's career was to assist in delivering one of the biggest reinsurance arrangements in Australia. When asked to summarize himself in one sentence, open-minded and adventurous with risk-averse mindset. Stanley, I'd like to hand over to you to talk about your career.
Thank you, Mike. Hi, everyone. So can you guys hear me properly? Or yeah, thank you. Yeah, so yeah, to start off with, so I'm working in a life insurance industry. So I think that's the first bullet point that Mike has. So my career path, actually, I've been working in life insurance for I think it's almost like 15 years now. So, but pretty much my career path, although it sounds very boring, is always in life insurance. So as but I work in different business areas within the life insurance industry. So to start off with, so I start off with like similar to most of you guys, or the people in here, they will be starting as in a grad program. So back in the GFC time, I'm very lucky that we actually get a grad role within AMP before. Working in the actuarial system team and try to learn on all the new system like actuarial system. I'm not sure you guys, all the people might not heard of like all this actuarial system, like profit models or a lot of like VSZ or spreadsheet, that kind of stuff. Which is quite a interesting path, especially for a grad, because like what we learn in uni doesn't really mostly translate to like there's a lot of like new system and software that we don't really use in the uni as well. So it's actually quite a very interesting role, not only to explore into the actual world, but also picking up a lot of like actual system knowledge as well. And after after I learn up all the system related tasks and processes, then the next role I pick up on is actually on a valuation role, which is working in a valuation team for wealth protections and also group insurance. So which is a very another very interesting role. So previous role is more like about system and IT, but then the valuation role is about talking to accounting teams, our finance team, talking to appointed actuaries, and not only that, but we're also talking to the administrator, because as a valuation actuary, you actually need to know not only how you evaluate the portfolio, but at the same time also picking up how you assess your data, which is you need to talk a lot with your administrator, your accounting teammates as well, which is another very interesting experience where we're actually learning a lot of like it's more like communication skill, like between like how you actually communicate between a actuary versus accounting teams and versus like a administration teams. This is one of the key highlights in my working life as well, is mainly because that in that few years I pick up a lot of like communication skill between different people, like different teams, so that you actually understand the languages from various teams, so that you actually can communicate to them properly. Because one of the key challenges that you potentially face in the future is actually within different team or different environment, they're actually talking about different languages. So within accounting ops, they might be talking about debit and credit, while in actual world, they're talking about policy liability, policyholder retained profit, or policyholder risk expectation, that kind of thing. But while in accounting ops, in administration team, they are mostly focusing on my data entry, my client profile, that kind of things. So it's a very, very interesting experience, especially from an actual point of view. After the interesting few years in valuations, I'll pick up a role in the advice team, which is working closely with the appointed actuaries, mainly around product and design, and also appointed actuary advice, which is also another a good mindset change, which is you kind of like putting yourself in the shoes of the appointed actuaries, try to assess all the different risk perspective of the company and all the different proposals. And after that, I found out like, okay, I work on a lot of time in virtual world. So I shifted slightly into like a data analytic world. So it's a quite a not like traditional shift, but like, yeah. So I step out from my comfort zone to actually to work on a data analytic world. Working on data governance, data structures, and data architects. So because I think back in the days, AMP is trying to separate, so Resolution Life bought part of the AMP, so we're actually in the separation projects. So part of those projects try to make sure our data is actually being transferred and transformed properly, which is a very, very different world compared to Actuarial's world. And then in the recent few months, I stepped back out from the transfer of the data, because I think that part of the components mostly finished. So I'm going back to the capital management team recently as a capital coordinator. So managing a lot of the capital delivery and capital modeling build, because the reason of the acquisition of the AIA as well. So yeah, this is my my journey, like going back and forward between like system, IT, actuarials, and then back to IT, and then back to actuarial again. So I guess my the tips that I am having for you guys is like as an actuary, don't be afraid of like going in and out from your comfort zone. So we're built skills like to face different challenges. And then we can easily go to different environment, because we're all quite smart, all smart people. So we are quite adaptive as well. So yeah, just don't be afraid to be challenged, and also or being challenged by other people. So, and also be shameless to actually ask questions if you don't really understand. But before you ask question, always do your homework before you ask. Otherwise, yeah, it wouldn't feel good for you. Looks good on yourself. I think that's pretty much from me, Mike.
That's fascinating. Thank you very much, Stanley. I'm sure I'm going to ask you some questions about the differences between data science and actuarial. I'm sure some of our attendees will raise those type of questions, but thanks for that. The next on our list now, we have Simone. Simone Collins is not only a fellow of the Institute, she also has an MBA and is a CIRA qualified actuary. Simone is the chief actuary at Picnic Labs. She lives in Queensland and has a background in general insurance. Two significant highlights of Simone's career are doing annual around the world trips to London, Bermuda, New York, Switzerland, Germany, and Singapore to meet with reinsurers, and becoming the appointed actuary for an employer and providing actual advice to the board and executives. When asked to summarize herself in one sentence, curious, warm, enthusiastic, and optimistic. And now hopefully we get to see Simone when she starts to speak.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I'm on, everyone. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, and it's good to be able to give a background on my career, and thanks, Stanley, for yours as well. So I actually started out at APRA, which is the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority. So they're the financial sector regulator. They regulate banks, general insurers, life insurance, superannuation. So for me as a graduate there, it was a really good opportunity to see the whole financial services sector, to be able to understand the operations, how they all interlink. And then my particular focus was in the general insurance space. So it gave me a good overview. I got to basically review every general insurance company that was operating in Australia at the time. I got to sit in with boards of directors, CEOs, chief actuaries. So yeah, as far as, being thrown into an opportunity where you get that really great overview, I think that a regulator definitely provides that. So while I was there, I saw a company called UE, thought that they were doing something a little bit interesting. When I started, UE had only been operating for about a year. So I actually reviewed their very first financial condition report written by the first actuary that came along, and kind of saw how they were growing over the next couple of years. Decided that I wanted to move out of Sydney, decided that I wanted to do something a bit different. So I harassed UE for about 6 months until they were like, who's this girl? She really wants to work here. And they ended up giving me a job, which was great. So moved up to the Sunshine Coast, which is still where I am, and joined the actuarial team there. And yeah, when I joined, it was a really small company. They weren't yet making a profit in Australia. They had maybe 250 employees, and everything was kind of in startup mode. So they had a bit of stuff, but we were very much, building out the actuarial systems, building out the pricing models, implementing kind of everything that you need for the long term for an insurance company. So that was another really great experience. And because I was in there from the start, I got to work in lots of different roles in the company. So I started out doing motor insurance pricing. So I got to do a lot of the modelling work there. I moved into the home insurance space. I got to implement their flood modelling, implement their address-based pricing models. I moved into valuation. So I did the actuarial valuations every quarter and every year. Reinsurance, as Mike touched on before. So I ended up being the reinsurance placing person for UE. So yeah, got to travel around the world every year, which was a particular highlight, and meet with reinsurers, discuss UE's portfolios, how it's growing, how we were doing pricing and modeling, and really kind of pitch and sell the story of the company to the global reinsurance market. So for me, that was a great role because it kind of balanced the schmoozing and the face-to-face piece with backing that up with real numbers and real modeling. And I think that for me, yeah, it was a really good balance of what we were doing. I got to be involved in opening a new office in New Zealand, and then a few years later closing that office in New Zealand. But it was a really great experience from both the business side and from the actuarial side, so implementing like earthquake models, which we didn't really need to worry about in Australia. And yeah, I was appointed as the appointed actuary in my last few years there as well. So providing advice to the board of directors around the financial viability of the company, and providing advice around risk and capital and financial projections. So it used to be a joke that I usually had about 4 or 5 jobs going at once, which is probably the case. I did get involved in lots of different areas, but it's a great experience to see it grow. And it grew from, yeah, about 250 people to about 1,500 or so when I left, multiple new products, new offices. So yeah, lots of experience there. And then after 9 years there, I decided that I wanted to go back into more of the build space instead of kind of the big company stuff that had started to become implemented there. So I joined a startup called Picnic Labs, which I'm sure most of you haven't heard of. So Picnic works in the mutual space. We create niche mutual DMF or discretionary mutual funds. So little niche insurance companies or life insurance companies that are owned by their members, and then Picnic manages those. So Picnic basically provides the services that an insurance company provides to its members, but we do that to these mutual funds. So yeah, I've been about 2.5 years at Picnic. Again, it's been lots of learnings, both on the business side. So I've kind of taken a detour into the business stuff with the Masters in Business that I studied at QUT a couple of years ago. And yeah, helping to build out this startup. So I was kind of one of the founding people within the company. We've got about 15 now, but when I started, there was a lot less than that. And on the actuarial side, building out models from scratch. So we really have no data to work with for a lot of the stuff that we're doing. So it's been a lot of learning on that space about, well, how do you go from having oodles of models and fun playing with data to, okay, I have nothing. What do I do now and how do I build this out? So yeah, it's been great. I've really enjoyed the building, the challenges, finding solutions to problems where you have to really think outside of the box and providing solutions directly to customers. So the customers are coming to us with their problems and we're having to design products and solutions for them that are fit for purpose for them. So yeah, again, a little bit of a different detour from the actuarial space. So yeah, I'll stop there and hand back to Mike for the next person.
Thanks very much, Simone. I mean, if that was a speech explaining how actuaries are beyond numbers, I don't know what else we could do. But so great, that was brilliant. I'd like to introduce Adam now. Adam Butler, who's an associate and an actuarial manager at HBF Health, lives in Western Australia, works in data analytics, health insurance, and management consulting. Two highlights of Adam's career have been to lead a project as a consultant that explored and leveraged cloud services to enable the use of big data that brought innovative insights into the business, and be accredited as an associate of the Institute of Actuaries Australia. When asked to summarise himself in one sentence, disciplined, ambitious, and self-motivated person who strives to give my best every time whilst maintaining a sense of humour and a friendly nature. So now we'll see Adam.
Cheers. Thanks, Michael. I trust I'm visible to everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Great, thanks.
Awesome. And yep, so I, as Michael mentioned, from HBF Health, which is a sort of health insurer, mostly historically has been based in WA, but we've sort of started branching out. And to those over East might be more familiar as just the fund that uses quokkas in their advertising, so hence the background. But before we sort of get into the HBF stint, I'll wind the clock back a little bit, not too far because I'm only still sort of fresh into the career, but sort of looking at graduated from Curtin University 2019, and that was obviously with the sort of actuarial science undergrad. I was actually interning during my final year, so that was as a management consultant, and that was actually not actuarial in nature. So that sort of just was a bit more generic sort of data analytics and a little bits and pieces here and there and sort of whatever the project required. And one thing that sort of drove that decision, and then obviously once I finished uni, I rolled into that on a more full-time basis, was I always knew long-term I wanted to get into actuarial science, but in terms of the short-term and getting my foot in the door and that sort of first opportunity outside of uni, I wanted something that was a little bit more broader and I guess would get me exposure to a lot of different contexts, a lot of different types of problems, a lot of different potentially, companies and just a lot of variety. So that was sort of the, I guess, ethos behind trying to get into consulting. And then the eventual goal of then moving into something actuarial. But I found that, what I want is effectively what I got. I was able to build quite a broad range of skills with each project, kind of relying on different tools, whether that's, specific sort of programming tools and languages or different ways of analysis, or even just the style of project itself. So, some projects were data analysis based. Some were about designing and optimizing end-to-end solutions. One that Mike mentioned briefly was sort of, a big chunk of data, how we then can actually analyze that because it's too big for an on-premise solution. So how can we leverage the cloud systems, which was sort of very much becoming the topic of conversation at the time, and how can we use that to actually bring some innovative insights into the business that weren't actually being reported on before. And one thing as well with consulting that I found really beneficial, certainly in my current role and I guess hopefully in the career going forward, is just the nature of consulting. You do have regular client interaction and there's always stakeholder meetings, whether it's you've got a certain number of weeks to finish something and then you're actually presenting that off, or there's some weeks where you're a bit more embedded in a team and you just do have sort of day-to-day interaction with the client. Maybe that's informal, maybe it's formal meetings, but all in all, you sort of build up that communication and presenting capability to sort of, assist your career going forward. So I was at this in this management consulting position for about 3.5 years at a company called Visagio. And then whilst I was here, I was also kept chipping away at my part 2, which is now, I think, the actuarial program. And I was chipping away at that and basically thought of when that starts tying up and I finish that, it might be good to start pivoting into the actuarial space, because I felt I got quite a lot of broad exposure that I wanted from the consulting space, but wanted to try and streamline a little bit into something actuarial and actually put some of that studying to specific use. But even then, I found a lot of the skills I learned, in the actuarial science degree certainly paid dividends when it came to just your general sort of data analytics job, or that, those sorts of positions. Didn't necessarily have to be using the sort of niche actuarial knowledge that we might learn through uni. But yeah, so then that sort of ended up starting the process of me transitioning to HBF. Was fortunate enough to sort of find an opening eventually, and then join the team here. And basically I moved into the role of an actuarial analyst May last year, and then was originally in sort of the actuarial product team, so very much looking at product performance, pricing, looking at work for the rate rises that will come sort of each year, and just doing a lot of sort of that check-ins with product performance, putting a lot of packs together, and obviously involvement with things like the financial condition report. Did a bit of work with the deferred claims liability things that was sort of floating around health insurance as a result of COVID and the claims that were perceived to be sort of deferred or missing at the time that would eventually come back. And then eventually sort of bumped up a bit and have now moved to the forecasting space. So I'm actually sort of the actuarial manager of the forecasting team at the moment. And that current position sort of sees me with a heavy dose of that stakeholder engagement, which is where I sort of look back at that time in consulting, and it's very much set me up well for the regular meetings and, going to different groups within the business, whether they be sort of reaching out to inter-department or, talking to executives or beyond there, and really sort of set me up great in that role. And the other aspect then is sort of, I guess, me personally, in that sort of forecasting space, given that, any decision that a business is going to make is going to try to be as informed as possible about what could happen. So you do find that you do sort of get dragged into a lot of different conversations around things that are happening within the business. And me personally, I find that is something I really enjoy. I really enjoy learning about specific things and becoming sort of, I guess, a master of my own domain. But when I can get exposure to what other people are doing or what other aspects of the business are doing and what they're up to, that's something I really enjoy as well. So just kind of meshing that all together. The current role is very much that sort of more management focused and very much conversations based, but then gives me a good challenge in trying to adapt to a space that I wasn't necessarily familiar with to begin with. But that's again something where with consulting, the nature of it was that, kind of short-term projects where you're sort of jumping around different things, have to learn quite quickly. So that really sort of instilled that practice in me and has helped sort of adapt to circumstances where initially I may not have a lot of familiarity, but then sort of over time and through the effort, you can sort of figure it all out from there. I suppose one quick tip to anyone. I know when I was going through uni, there was a big push to land a position with the Big Four. It was sort of seen if you don't land that, then you won't be able to find your way into the actuarial pathway at all. And just sort of want to cement that position as not being true. You can sort of, if you're driven enough and you really want to end up in something actuarial, you'll find that the skill set you learn from uni applies to a lot of different positions and a lot of different companies and a lot of different types of work. And then you can sort of just build up that resume, build up your experience, and then sort of transition over there. So don't be too worried if you didn't get that perfect, intern to grad to then straight into something actuarial pathway.
Thank you, Adam. Again, that's a good demonstration of even within one entity how varied your work can be, and but how relevant a lot of the techniques you learn in university and post-university can help you go onwards and upwards there. The next and final speaker today is Mark Samuels, who's a fellow, as a principal and a senior actuarial consultant at Mercer. Works in Victoria in the superannuation space. Highlight of Mark's career has been qualifying as a fellow after failing his final exam 5 times in a row. Perseverance is the key here. If you want it, you will get there. That experience, however painful and demoralizing it was at times, made me really value becoming an actuary. and also being accepted as part of the inaugural Young Actuaries Advisory Board, have progressed him to being the chair for 2023. Mark finds having challenging goals keeps him motivated, driven, and focused. So now I'll hand over to Mark.
Thank you very much, Mike, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. My career story begins in Scotland, which is where the accent comes from. I did actuarial science at Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh. I was one of those kids who just knew at 16, 17 years old that I wanted to become an actuary, probably few and far between. Most people don't really learn what an actuary does till a lot later in life. And like most people, I started looking for internships at the end of my penultimate year at university. And I would say I really just took a bit of a scattergun approach and applied far and wide. So insurance, superannuation, working in-house corporate or consulting. I didn't have a preference. I just really wanted to land a role, which is the obvious thing. And thankfully, out of I think probably about 15 or 20 applications, I managed to get one offer. So quite lucky in a sense as well, but that was in superannuation consulting. And I had an 8-week internship over the summer and absolutely loved it. I was lucky enough that at the end of that internship, they offered me a graduate role for when I graduated at the end of the following year. And it was a big relief to me because I knew how much time I'd spent doing all those long applications for the internship. So knowing that the role was there locked up, I just had to make sure that I got a good enough degree throughout my 4th year, which what I focused on. I would say for me, the main challenge when I started work was definitely working on my people skills. I was naturally an introvert at that time, although I would say that's probably swung the other way now. And what really helped me was actually being in the office. At the time when I started work, well, 13 years ago now, there was no homeworking. We didn't even have laptops. Everybody had an assigned desk. And I was lucky enough to sit next to one of the partners and one of the other consulting actuaries. And I just listened to the way they spoke to their clients, the way they interacted with other people in the office. I just really immersed myself in that, and it was a huge learning. So I know a lot of you may not have been used to office working or even at uni, and it's doing everything from home nowadays. But for me, the office was a huge benefit getting in there young. One thing that I got told very early on was that I was maybe a bit cold. And I went to talking about tasks too quickly. So what I used to do was go and speak to a colleague if I needed help, and I would just be straight into the task. That's all I wanted to talk about. None of the fluff, as I probably saw it at that time, of let's have a chat about what you did at the weekend or what you did last night. And it was pretty impersonal. So I was given that feedback and, worked hard over time to make sure that whenever I went to speak to somebody, I had those conversations. And now I have a goal that whenever I'm talking to my clients, I try and make them laugh at least once during every call. It doesn't always work. It's also a bit of fun for me, but really helps make sure that you build those personal relationships. So I worked in superannuation in Scotland for 6 years, qualifying after 5. And as Mike said in my intro, I failed my fellowship exam 5 times. So it took me 3 years to pass that last exam in total, which was painful at times, but I learned a lot from each failure, and I'm glad I stuck it out and put the perseverance in to actually qualify. But I'd always had a dream to move to Australia. I had family out here, and my company was a UK-based company, so if I wanted to move to Australia, I had to quit my job. And I did quit my job, and I didn't have a job lined up when I moved to Australia. I had interviews with different companies whilst I was still in the UK, but none of them wanted to take the risk that I would actually come over. So I just had to come over and decided I wanted to do it when I was young so that I didn't miss the opportunity. So I took that risk and I moved in 2016. And unfortunately, I couldn't find a job for 3 months, which was really tough financially, knowing that, well, Melbourne is quite an expensive city. But I would say even more so, it was mentally tough. And I really learned the importance of having a network of people to talk to in times when struggling. So I'm now very focused as a people leader on mental and emotional health and making sure that my team are feeling comfortable in what they're doing. Thankfully, IAG took a risk on me and offered me a role in their reserving team. And of course, I'd never worked in general insurance before, so it was completely new and meant going back to basics and learning new actuarial techniques every day. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I just enjoy learning in general. After 15 months of that, I got offered a job in Mercer as a superannuation consulting and was very glad to get back into my roots. And that's me now been 5 years at Mercer. Still loving my job. It's changed over time, as often does. I've got a nice mix of the traditional defined benefit actuarial work that people think that's all superannuation actuaries do, but now do a lot of strategic kind of management consulting type work on member outcomes, retirement income strategies. And as I said before, I also have a responsibility as a people leader, and I'll have a team of 10 analysts and young actuaries that I mentor in their careers as well. Thanks very much, Mike. I'll pass back to you.
Oh, great. Thanks, Mag, especially for sharing your personal growth stories. It's something that we all need to work on throughout our careers, and often we don't give as much time as we should. I'm going to switch over to a panel view now. We've got a few questions have come in, and what I'm going to do is some of them I'll direct to one panel, one or two, and sometimes the entire panel will have a go at answering a question. So please raise more questions if you like. You have the choice of making them anonymous. What are the prospects of working overseas as a consulting actuary in life insurance? I am interested in understanding the demand and motivations for other countries for hiring actuaries in Australia. I'm not sure we can answer the question specifically about overseas country wanting in life insurance, but I'm going to ask Simone to talk about her ideas of why would foreign companies employ Australian actuaries based on your experience of doing your round the world trips.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mike. And that is exactly the case. I did meet quite a few Australian actuaries in some of these overseas reinsurance companies. So not specifically life insurance, because I'm in the general insurance space. But yeah, Bermuda, London, US, and other areas. I think the experience that the Australian actuaries bring is the local knowledge for the global companies. So these global companies need to understand, well, from the general insurance side, what happens when bushfires go through Australia, what happens with these giant hailstorms that they don't seem to get in other parts of the world, an understanding of the local building codes, all of that sort of thing. So there is this real local knowledge of that, plus the companies that operate in Australia. So these reinsurance companies are looking at insuring the big insurance companies in Australia. So to have the knowledge of the local market, how many insurance companies they are, how big they are, etc., etc. There's some real useful knowledge that the Australian-based actuaries can bring into those global companies. So again, not specifically life insurance or consulting, but I think that some of those things could transfer as well if you had these bigger companies that are potentially looking to do more work within Australia, or want a better understanding of even just a different perspective on how things happen in Australia compared to how they're used to happening there. I think that the skills themselves are generally transferable, so the knowledge that you've built up in the local market can be of real value.
Thank you. I would like to add the fantastic education system in Australia will prepare you to work anywhere in the world. So I would also maybe ask Mark to answer that question as well, because you've come the other way from Scotland to Australia. What do you notice about Australian actuaries and transferring their skills abroad?
Yeah, thanks very much, Mike. I was hoping you'd come to me. Yeah, I can't answer specific to life insurance. Again, my background's mainly superannuation. But what I can say is the actuarial skill set is needed across the world. Regulations and environments change slightly, but your technical skills will generally be the same all over the world. So thankfully, the Australian qualification does allow you to move quite easily to certain countries around the world and not have to restudy and not have to retrain. And that was similar with the UK coming to Australia. I know that the reverse is also true. So getting through your exams, getting qualified really is just the start of opening up the journey that you want if you really want to move abroad.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. If you look on our website for the viewers, actuaries.asn.au, there's a list of countries where we have mutual recognition agreements. So when you qualify with us, you can go to countries like North America, the UK, India, etc., where there's no more exams to do, provided you do 6 months or a year's probationary period. I'm going to ask you a question here to Stanley, because of your interactions in the sort of the data science space and back in the actuarial, what programming language is popular among actuaries working in different industries, stroke roles?
In terms of language, programming languages at the moment in my company. So in terms of data governance or data like querying data, at the moment we're still using SQL database. So SQL will be one of those key languages that we use for managing data or querying data within data cloud or AWS workspace. The other thing that we also use is mainly at the moment is Python. So we do use Python for quite a lot of modeling or even AI modeling, AI as well. But another important tool that we're actually starting to use actually is a Power Query. So it's kind of similar to like a Excel base, but it's actually kind of like a bit of like a query behind the scenes. So those are the things that we're actually mostly using at the moment for data analytics and data management.
Well, thank you, Stanley. I want a question I'm going to direct towards Adam. And Adam sort of answered this for his personal ones. You might talk a bit more wider. How do you figure out which area of actuarial work to go into after graduation?
Good question. Thanks, Mike. For me, it was pretty uncertain. I wasn't really swayed either way. I guess one thing, there was a strong focus in the studying we did towards life insurance. But I sort of found that, I wasn't really sure which path I wanted to go down. It was sort of more of when the opportunity arose itself, which one do I want to go down? And I had a few people I knew who sort of worked at HBF, and, it's very much in WA, quite a loyalty brand, very strong sort of strong standing history. So sort of jumped at the opportunity to work here. And I guess I certainly didn't regret it. I know sort of looking at a lot of the different lines of insurance, they can be echoing the same sort of principles in that. But I do find health somewhat unique in that respect. Obviously, just due to something like being community rated, we can't price on the same factors. We don't necessarily price on risk like a lot of the other lines of insurance. I think it's more, if you don't necessarily have a strong idea of what you want to do going into it, I don't think there's anything wrong about trying to, at least just pick one and go for it, and see how you find that, because at the end of the day, you're going to learn more from doing that than, sitting on your laurels and not necessarily trying to get involved with something. So I think it's more just, if you've got a strong inkling, follow that, go with it, see if an opportunity presents itself. And if not, see what, opportunities do come up, and grab a hold of them as quick as you can.
Right. Thank you, Adam. I've got a question here. I'm going to read it out, but then slightly change it. It's, what are the odds of someone from a developing country obtaining an opportunity to land an actuarial role, work in Australia? I'm going to make that a bit more general and just ask about if the panelists could talk about what you're seeking from somebody when they're coming for an interview for a role at your place. I'll pass over to Simone first.
Yeah, sure, thanks. And I can probably slightly answer the previous question, because we did we have quite a lot of interaction with South African applicants, because the parent company was South African. So for there, it was really around the visas and the process that's involved in getting people over to Australia from those countries. So I hired someone and it took her 6 months to actually get into Australia. So it's about the company being willing to have that patience and the need for someone right now versus down the track. But I suppose in general, what am I looking for? number one is the right attitude. I think that generally, we've all said actuarial skills are something that is taught, and we're generally looking at very smart people when you're looking at hiring actuaries. So the key is around the attitude to the role, and that can vary a lot depending on, if it's someone bright and fresh and straight out of university, then they're not carrying the experience with them that you might be looking for some of those more senior roles. So when you don't have much experience within a career path already, because you're coming out of university or coming out of your first role, it's have there been other extracurricular things that might demonstrate a real enthusiasm, so looking at university clubs or any kind of internships or anything that can demonstrate that people have been taking initiative. And it's even one, Zach, we had someone who was working for no formal work experience, but helped their friend to set up a financial model because his friend was struggling with something, and so he was telling the story about how he managed to take his friend's bank accounts and help him out with all of this stuff, and a super interested project for him. So it wasn't any real proper work experience, but gave the right attitude to enthusiasm around the workplace and all of that sort of thing. So yeah, for me that's key. And we're also looking at technical skills and people skills are probably the other couple that come across in interviews. Sorry, Mike just muted there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I muted myself. I'm going to ask Adam that question to Adam as well. Have you got anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mike. I think definitely similar sentiment. I think as well, sort of piggybacking on that more, I guess, attitude aspect of it, the kind of values you can discern from a person, and really the level of enthusiasm they can bring to the role. And look, to a point that was brought up earlier, we're all decently smart people. The technical skills are going to relatively be a given. We've all gone through the sort of studying in that, and we understand a lot of the different technical aspects of doing this job in whatever sort of industry that you sort of end up in. But it is very much about, okay, what's there beyond that? Is it some sort of extracurricular? There's displayed initiative somewhere. They've just really got a keenness and an attitude and a positive attitude. They're going to fit great into the team. And they're going to really bolster the team and bring the best out of the people around them as well. It really just depends on what the kind of makeup of the person, I guess, and their attitudes and their values. And obviously, if you're looking for something in particular, that's going to narrow your search bar a little bit. If it's a more senior role, then naturally those coming out of university can't be put into that, or vice versa. You might be looking at focusing specifically on grads, in which case there's not the sort of wealth of work experience to look at and to try and separate the candidates. So it is very much what's been done outside of just studying the degree, because everyone who's going to be applying for the job would have done that. So it's really about trying to separate yourself from what might just be the norm, I guess. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. This is one for directly at Stanley. What steps did you take to improve your communication skills? And the context of that was really, how would you best understand the context, background, and your audience when you're involved in a project, for example?
Yeah. So usually the way that we the way that I learned from I learned the hard way though, because I think the start of those conversations usually not an easy one, because usually from an actual background we don't talk in the same language as other people. So I guess to start off with those conversations, just be humble and try to listen and try to understand, try to learn from how people actually talk about different languages as well. So I think after a few initial conversations, so you actually potentially get the rhythm and also get the acronym that actually people try to pick up. So then you can actually then translate and try to make sense of what they actually trying to referring to. So it's not an easy step, because I think everyone even other people we're speaking in different languages. It's very hard to pick up a new language, but it takes time. So I guess just to start off with that journey, you just be a listener and be humble at the start. Try to understand and try to communicate where you're coming from as well, so that actually people can give you a bit more buffers to explain a bit more detail to you. So it's not an easy journey, but like I think once you actually master that skill set, it's a very important and very useful skill set to actually start. You can become a bridge between different teams as well.
Right. Thank you, Stanley. That's very good. There's a question that's been raised. Mark mentioned about how important networking is in times of trouble. How important is networking for graduates during the early stages of careers? And how much do you think it is effective to send cold messages and emails asking for internships or graduate opportunities? And do you have any advice on strategies that could increase the chance of landing a job? And I'll direct that one at Mark.
Thank you. I would go as far as saying that networking is important at all aspects in your career and at all times, not just at early stages in your career. It's something that whether it's actuarial or any industry that you're in, you should always be networking. On the part about sending cold messages and cold emails, they're not going to be very successful in the vast majority of cases. I know I get a lot via LinkedIn and into my work as well. And I don't want to, well, firstly, I don't want to be not be polite and at least answer back, but I have a very busy life, work, everything else that goes on, probably like most other people. So it's very hard to spend a lot of time when you get a lot of cold emails. In my mind, the way you should be trying to network and engaging with potential employers, if you're, say, graduate, is joining uni societies and getting to the uni society events. I know the actuarial societies within Melbourne, and I'm pretty sure the ones around Australia are all really good at having events. They have sponsors, and you can get a lot of face time talking to people who are potentially going to be the hiring manager at the job that you're wanting to get. And even if you're not successful in applying for a job, it just helps you hone those personal skills and communication skills so that when it comes to interview, you should hopefully have a better opportunity of getting a job. I can say, though, that I am one of the hiring managers at Mercer, and I have in the past hired people because of the times I've met them at uni society events. It's already put them in, I would say, good favour with regards to the interview process. I didn't get involved in their interview because I was already conflicted, knowing that I had a probably very biased opinion of what I was looking for. So got other people to interview them, and they agreed with what I decided. And those people got internships and then eventually showed their wares and got graduate jobs. So it really does highlight the importance of getting out there and talking to potential employers.
Thank you, Mark. Anybody else would like to add any points to that question?
I think just definitely seconding the importance of, networking isn't always just on the basis of wanting to get a grad role. Even just generally, the kind of practice you can get in the people skills and actually just going up to people and, engaging in conversation, seeing what sort of work they're involved in. That's something that's not only going to, prove useful in the next 5 years of your career, but you're just going to be doing more and more of it as time goes on. So if you can get as much practice as you can, as early on in your career as possible, there's no real downside to that, I suppose. And, if a job comes out of it, then all the more for it.
Great. Thanks, Adam. There's a question directed to Simone. What was your thought processes behind getting your CIRA qualification while working in the general insurance space?
Yeah, sure. So there's probably a couple of elements of that. One is that risk management is everywhere in general insurance. So, general insurance companies all have risk management departments, chief risk officers, consultants. The consulting firms also have a really big presence in that space. And I was also working at APRA at the time. So that's a really big focus of the prudential regulator is on the risk management space. So I think that for me, it provided another option of a career path, even though I didn't end up going into that space and stayed within the actuarial kind of modelling pricing space. Another career path, but also helped me with the career path that I did end up choosing, because things like capital modelling, appointed actuary work, that is quite heavy in that risk management world as well. And so having a knowledge about enterprise risk management and how all of that works helped me to fulfil my role in general insurance as well.
Thank you. I'd like to add as well that the course that we run, the ERM one that's been revamped, is CIRA approved, and it's approved at such a standard you don't have to do a 2-day course afterwards. We're the only society in the world that happens. We've got 2 questions I'm going to read out. They're linked, so I'll read them together. What do you think about actuaries trying to switch from life insurance to general insurance or vice versa? Local employers seem to be reluctant to consider people without relevant experience, for which we get into a Kafkaesque loop where to get a job, you have to get experience from a job you'll never get, etc., etc. And then a related question is, how long would you recommend staying in a role before maybe considering trying a different field of actuarial work? I'll check up to Mark, and then I'll ask the other 3 panelists to think about that one.
Thanks, Mike. Well, I've done this, and other panelists have as well. I've been from super to general insurance back to super. So I don't know if there's a perfect time to do it. A bit of a plug here. As part of the Young Actuaries Advisory Board, we are planning to have a session with a recruitment agency where we get them to focus a bit on this, knowing that it is something that young actuaries think about. But so keep an eye out for that in December. But I'll now go back to answering the question. I think you have to explain to the employer in your interview as to how you can demonstrate that you've got the capabilities and the skills to learn something new, ultimately. And that's what I focused on when I came over here, because there was no superannuation consulting role for me. I got a couple of interviews, be it in general insurance or life insurance, and the question was there. You have no experience in this. How are you going to do? And I explained I love learning. My actuarial skill set is strong, and it's shown me that I have technical skills and problem solving skills that I will maybe take time, but I will learn and develop those over time. The other thing that you might have to do is maybe take a sideways step or a backward step in your career. So the role that I got within IAG was based on my experience, so a number of years of experience, was probably 1 or 2 levels back down the career ladder, which I was more than comfortable with, because I knew I was moving into somewhere that I didn't have the experience of people who were 6 years free from uni and graduated and having worked in general insurance. So if it's something you really want to do, you might have to take what could be seen as a backward step for a better long-term career goal.
I just run along the order I can see. Simone?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mike. So I don't have any direct experience in switching industry completely, because I've always worked in the general insurance space. I suppose a couple of things in my experience. One was completely different product lines. So at the moment, I came from property. I'm looking at stuff that's in financial lines space and working with banks, and lots of learnings there. So I suppose it comes back to, again, the curiosity and the ability to learn, and the skill sets being transferable across multiple products, industries, whatever you're working on. The other thing I would say is that in my previous role, we did hire people from life insurance industry into general insurance. It was very successful. The people who are coming across are doing it for a good reason, whether they're interested in the space or they're interested in the company or looking to grow. In fact, the now CEO of the general insurance company that I used to work for had a life insurance background, qualified in life insurance, and then moved over to Australia to work in general insurance. So it can happen, and it can be very successful. I don't think it's anything to be scared of if you're looking at switching into a new space.
Good. Adam?
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I think there's a few different stages to this. I think there was one point there looking at sort of how long should you stay if you're looking to sort of jump between industries or different opportunities. If I sort of look at when I actually just entered the actuarial space, so going from, sort of generic management consulting to health insurance, if we're looking at, I guess, the very technical work I was doing at the time, found my groove pretty quick, was able to sort of, churn out everything that came my way. But when it came to actually understanding all the different forces that interplay within the industry and all the different dynamics that are sort of existing, I only really found my groove in that space after sort of 9-ish months. So I suppose you want to make sure you're allowing enough time to sort of hit that groove, and it's going to be different for different sorts of people, how quick they can adapt to things, or the opportunities that they're able to jump onto at work, and maybe the kinds of conversations they're exposed to. But you want to allow enough time to sort of hit that groove and spend a bit of time where you can understand more than just the specific coding you're doing or this one model you're building, to actually understand more about the broad strokes of the industry and the business itself. And then, if I suppose maybe after 2 years that's not for you, you can sort of then look at swapping industries. And on, I guess, the swapping industries point, moving now back to, I guess, a grad lens, there was 2 aspects of that question. One to do with that spiral of, you need experience to get the job, but if you then need a job to get that experience that you then require experience for, and you sort of end up in that spiral. I suppose that's where I can quite personally talk to. You don't necessarily have to get experience in a job that's exactly like that. In my case, it was management consulting, which was very much just, a lot of data analytics work, things that didn't require an actuarial skill set. If I look at what I studied at uni, basically the only thing I ended up using in that consulting opportunity was obviously the problem solving skills and a little bit of SQL knowledge, Python, and Excel use, but a lot of that was learnt on the job anyway. So when it came to actually swapping to health insurance, it was about, to Mark's point, actually showing that I can learn on the job. And look, I've got this experience behind me, and I straight up said, I don't have really much understanding of health insurance. I, acknowledge that will be a temporary shortfall. But what I can say is I've got experience in consulting where I've been thrown on projects that lasted, 6 weeks or whatever period of time. And within 2 weeks or a week, I'm at a level where I can converse with not only the client, but all the different people involved in the project. And I've sort of, very quickly built up a skill set and a technical understanding, being exposed to a lot of different contexts and sort of the, different niche knowledge they bring. So it's less about, I need to have experience with this very specific skill set that they're looking for, and sort of selling yourself and saying, maybe it is acknowledging I don't actually have any work experience in this particular regard, but, I've got all this stuff behind me, which shows that I can learn on the job. And yeah, I might, not understand everything that's going on for the first few months. And in reality, you don't really expect most people to anyway. But you ask the questions and you fully immerse yourself in the work, and then you get to a point where all of a sudden you've found a groove and you're actually starting to hit your strides, and you really start to know the industry and your work as well. And then when it comes to swapping industries, yeah, it's the same basically thing. You just prove that you can learn. So you've got a wealth of experience behind you, whether you're swapping life to general or health, whatever it is. There's aspects that are going to interplay between all industries. I've only worked in one, so I'm probably not the best person to talk to what they might be. But, we all report to regulators and that, and modeling techniques are typically very similar. So a lot of the technical grounding is pretty set in stone for a lot of the different industries. It's just variations on them. So when you get experience to one, you can very much leverage a lot of what you've done in one in another space. But again, probably not the best person to talk to that, given I've only experienced health and then outside of that.
Great. Thanks, Adam. I was going to pass over to Stanley, but we've only got 1 or 2 minutes left, and we're going to have a hard close at 5. There's a couple of questions left, which we'll probably answer outside of this forum. Before we wrap up, I'd certainly like to thank everybody attending, and a huge thanks to the 4 panelists for sharing their wisdom and all the advice. I know many of you are listening are looking for your first jobs, but I hope you get from this the wide variety of jobs that are available out there, and the fact that you will be learning throughout your career, not just doing the formal education, but forever learning. And if any of you have the chance to meet the president this year at your universities, Naomi Edwards, she talked about, I forget this brain thing she was talking about, the GABA, about the plasticity of the mind, and what sets you apart from many others is this plasticity in your brain, enabling you to pick up new concepts. And I'm sure for the listeners today, you realise that the 4 speakers today gave us a wonderful talk around the way that their jobs change, their responsibilities change, their communication skills, and Mark's sort of discovery of himself earlier on in his life, etc. So I just finally just say thanks to everybody, and just looking forward to you giving us your time again. And for all those out there, I wish you all the best in your job hunt. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone, for tuning in.
Bye. Bye. Bye.